My wife and I, married for 10 years, had just celebrated our anniversary, and we share two wonderful kids. But lately, things between us have been off, and it's been hard to figure out what went wrong. At the start of the year, I noticed changes in her behavior. Some days, she seemed happy, but on others, she was irritable, distant, and unpredictable. She'd avoid me, and our intimacy had dwindled to almost nothing. Some days she'd be the perfect mother, doting on the kids, and on others, she'd lash out, saying she wished she never had children. I was confused, hurt, and felt like I was losing her. A few weeks ago, I had to see a urologist for a urinary tract infection, and the tests revealed it was an STD. I was in total shock. I hadn't been with anyone but my wife since we started dating, and the news shook me to my core. It was like the ground had been pulled from beneath my feet. I couldn't understand how this was happening, but I knew something was seriously wrong. At that time, my wife was away at a so-called business seminar, and out of desperation, I did something I never thought I would do. I went through her personal diaries. I had never touched them before, respecting her privacy, but something inside me needed answers. What I found left me devastated. It turns out my wife had been cheating on me for the past 2 years. Her diaries revealed multiple affairs with at least 6 different men. One of them had lasted over a year, and the reason she'd been so moody lately was because that lover had moved on. She wrote about meeting men during her seminars, business trips, dinners, and other events that I thought were work-related. Meanwhile, I was at home, taking care of our children, completely unaware of the deceit happening behind my back. I read through pages where she detailed her encounters, describing them in a way that made me sick to my stomach. What hurt the most was her complete lack of guilt. She even expressed how grateful she was to have me as a loyal husband and father. Yet there wasn't a hint of remorse for what she'd been doing. The level of deceit, the depth of the lies, it made me question everything about her. Everything I thought I knew about our relationship. I was shattered. At one point, the weight of it all became too much. I was seriously considering ending my life. The betrayal was overwhelming, and I didn't know how to cope. Thankfully, a few close friends came through for me. They took me in for a few days, supported me when I felt I couldn't go on, and helped me find a therapist. I've been seeing the therapist weekly now, trying to make sense of everything and heal from the trauma. My friends also connected me with divorce lawyers, and I'm taking steps toward that, though I feel like I'm moving through this nightmare in slow motion. When I picked up the kids from my in-laws after my wife's trip, I felt hollow inside. I didn't want to smile or pretend everything was okay. One night, I was sitting with my daughter, trying to hold it together, and she just looked at me, noticing how broken I was. Without saying a word, she came over and wrapped her little arms around me. In that moment, I broke down. I held her tight and sobbed uncontrollably. She's my angel, and the thought of leaving her and my son to suffer under their mother's indifference was too much for me to bear. The first few weeks after discovering the truth were unbearable. I barely slept and had to rely on sleeping pills to make it through the night. I had no motivation for anything: work, life, even my kids. The only thing that gave me any relief was exercise. I forced myself to go to the gym, and for a short while, it helped me feel like I could get through this. To those who encouraged me not to give up on exercise, I owe you more than you know. You might have saved my life. When my wife returned from her trip, the strain of pretending I didn't know was unbearable. It took every ounce of willpower not to confront her. She did notice something was off with me, but I've managed to keep my knowledge of her affairs hidden. I'm trying to figure out the right time to act, but every day that passes, it gets harder. Her lack of shame is infuriating. Recently, she asked me about the expensive gift I had promised her for our anniversary, which I had managed to delay giving her. Even worse, she's planning another business trip, and I found out through her diaries that she's meeting her latest lover on my birthday. The thought of it makes me sick. I don't know how much longer I can keep up this charade. I'm holding on for the sake of the kids, but the betrayal runs deep. I'm slowly putting the pieces together to move forward, but it's been the hardest thing I've ever faced. The only thing I know for sure is that I can't continue living like this much longer. Something has to change. Lately, I've been feeling better than I have in months, and I owe a lot of that to exercise and therapy. It's hard to believe that I had never seen a therapist before this whole ordeal. Looking back, I regret not starting sooner. After discovering my wife's betrayal, I was drowning in self-blame, constantly thinking that maybe if I had done things differently or put in more effort, it wouldn't have come to this. My therapist has helped me realize that while there are always things one can improve in a relationship, her actions were her own choice. No one deserves to be treated the way I was, no matter the circumstances. If anything, I've realized that my fault lies in always putting her needs above my own. I trusted her unconditionally, always letting her go on these business trips without asking too many questions, all while trying to balance work and taking care of the kids alone. I convinced myself that I was being a supportive husband, doing the right thing by letting her focus on her career, and that maybe if I had been a better partner, she wouldn't have needed to escape. But I now see that I was sacrificing my well-being for someone who wasn't doing the same for me. I can't say I'm completely healed. There are still days when the sadness creeps in, but lately, anger has replaced much of that sorrow. My therapist suggested I channel that anger into productive actions, and surprisingly, it's helped. I've been using that energy to push forward rather than let it consume me. In my meetings with 2 law firms, they advised me to gather as much evidence as I could, and that's exactly what I've been doing over the past few weeks. I went through her diaries, the ones I discovered detailing her affairs. It was hard to face the truth, but I needed to know everything. I also accessed her computer, which held even more damning evidence, photos, chat logs, and documents that confirmed what I had read in her journals. She's also been posting about her escapades in a private Facebook group, and I took screenshots of those as well. It was surreal seeing how openly she was discussing her betrayals with others. I've spent hours identifying all the men she mentioned in her diaries, digging through social media and other channels to find out who they are. Some of them have been easy to track down, others not so much, but I'm getting there. I also managed to gather personal details about her current lovers, and now I'm debating whether I should confront them or not. It's a strange feeling, but as I uncover more information, I've found a certain satisfaction in piecing everything together. I never imagined I'd be in this position, but it's almost like solving a puzzle, one that just keeps expanding. There's a part of me that wants to expose her publicly. It would be so easy to post everything I've found, her diaries, the screenshots, the photos, and watch her world fall apart. Her business relies heavily on social media, and the thought of dismantling her carefully curated image is tempting. But I'm holding back for now, partly because I don't want our children to get caught in the crossfire. Her parents, who have always been kind to me, don't deserve to be dragged into this either. They've supported us through so much, and the idea of hurting them weighs heavily on my mind. I'm also unsure whether I should tell her parents about all of this. They've always been there for us. But this news would devastate them. Still, they deserve to know the truth, and I'm struggling with when or how to reveal it. Right now, my main focus is on ensuring that I have a solid plan before confronting her. I need to secure custody of our kids, and the legal system here tends to favor mothers, even in situations like this where she's clearly unfit. I'm working closely with my lawyers to prepare for the custody battle and to set the terms of our divorce. It's a slow and painful process, but I know it's the only way forward. This entire experience has been beyond painful, but I'm finding strength in the steps I'm taking to rebuild. It's not easy, and there's still a long road ahead. But I'm determined to do what's best for me and, most importantly, for my kids. They deserve better than this, and so do I. Second story. My boyfriend and I have been together for 3 years, living together for most of that time. His brother is getting married soon, and my boyfriend was asked to be the best man. Naturally, he was invited to the bachelor party, and I didn't mind. I had even been invited to the bride's bachelorette party later that week. Everything seemed fine. That night, around 2 a.m., my phone started blowing up with messages. Confused, I checked to see what was going on. To my shock, someone at the bachelor party took my boyfriend's phone and sent me live videos of him having sex with another woman. In the videos, he looked out of it, barely conscious, while the woman moved aggressively on top of him. And the other guys cheered and threw alcohol around. The person holding the phone shouted at me, "Your boy is having so much fun right now." I was in disbelief. The first video showed my boyfriend receiving a lap dance, visibly drunk but still awake. I couldn't take it anymore. I blocked his number to stop the messages. My hands were shaking as I tried to call his brother, but he didn't answer. I even tried calling his dad, thinking maybe he could help, but no luck. That night, I just cried until I fell asleep, unable to process what I had just seen. The next morning, around 11 a.m., his friends brought him home. They had to help him walk, and when I opened the door, they left him on the couch without saying a word. He slept for hours, waking up around 4 p.m., hungover and confused. He didn't even know how he got home. His phone was missing, and he had no idea who had taken it. We barely spoke, and I didn't mention the infidelity. I wanted him to bring it up first, but for 2 days, there was just silence. He looked scared, like he knew what his friends had shown me, but didn't know how to start the conversation. I wasn't sure if our relationship was over, but I knew he had to take responsibility for what happened. After those 2 days, I couldn't keep quiet anymore. I confronted him, showing him the videos I had received. He looked horrified, claiming he barely remembered anything. He said he was almost unconscious during the whole thing. But the problem was, in the videos, he was clearly aroused, and I found it hard to believe he could be like that while being so drunk. I told him I didn't believe his story. He explained that they were all drinking heavily and that someone had brought the woman to entertain the guys. The last thing he remembered was waking up on the sofa at home. He insisted that when he gets drunk, he loses strength and falls asleep easily, but the fact that he was hard made me think he wasn't telling the whole truth. We argued. He cried, saying he'd never cheat on me intentionally, but his story had too many holes. I had seen too many videos of him with that woman to just accept his explanation. Eventually, I couldn't take it anymore, so I left and went to stay with my sister. Afterward, I called the bride and told her everything that had happened at the bachelor party. This led to chaos. Many of the guys at the party had a lot of explaining to do. The guest list for the wedding shrank, with a lot of people refusing to attend after hearing about the party. The bride was devastated and wanted to postpone the wedding, but with no refunds available for the venues and vendors, the wedding went ahead as planned, though with far fewer guests than expected. Since then, my boyfriend's brother has blamed me for ruining the wedding, and I've heard that my ex is deeply depressed because of everything that happened. He blames himself, and people have said that I've destroyed him. I can't stop thinking about those videos and picturing that woman on him while the guys cheered. It's eating me up inside. Now, I can't help but wonder if I'm the one at fault for how things turned out. The wedding happened as scheduled, despite the smaller guest list. The bride and I are on good terms, but her new husband blames me for ruining everything. I was invited to the bachelorette party but chose not to go, and of course, I didn't attend the wedding either. It's been hard, and even though I know the situation was messy, I'm left wondering if I did the right thing or just made everything worse. Third story. Growing up, I, F27, had a childhood friend Angie, F27, who was as close as a real sister. We spent entire weekends at each other's place, celebrated family events etc. from 6 years old till 18 years old. Y'all even lived at her place in 2nd grade while my parents went to a nasty divorce. I learned to speak some Russian, as she is Russian, and she learned to speak some Spanish. Needless to say, her older brother and little sister were like a family to me. During our teenage years she had her 2 male best friends, one whom she started dating, and another one, Nico, now 29, who was Russian as well, whom I started dating at 17. Growing up I had issues with a heart condition. I won't bore you with the details, but I had to take a lot of meds, but got healthier starting from 16. One didn't have to take them daily but only when my heart rate became irregular, but then immediately, as it would become extremely painful, my heart would cramp, I would start to hyperventilate. All my friends knew this, Nico included, and that I would black out if my meds got taken with alcohol. I didn't smoke much or drink much growing up as a result, since I was worried about my health and only did drink at home or in a safe setting. Legal drinking age is 16 here and I only drank wine or beer if at all. I had my first time with Nico at 17 and when my parents stayed at a retreat 2 weeks later he come over to have a date night. I did drink 1 glass of wine, but starting having health issues later resulting in me taking my meds and being unconscious. I was a bit sore the next morning but didn't think much about it. 2 weeks later I'm informing Nico that I'm late on my period and he starts to panic, confessing he had with me while I was unconscious. We had it before, so he didn't think much about it. Apparently he didn't have a condom, but since I was on the pill he figured it was alright, and he also didn't come in me, but in a tissue. I felt violated and disgusted by myself. I didn't know how to describe this and only told Angie about it. I was an utter mess for a few years, and wasn't able to have again until 2 years later. I didn't remember any of it, but was too ashamed to go to my mom or anybody else. I didn't think of it as rape back then. I was too young to really understand what and how I was violated, and Angie told me it's alright, I should break up if I feel bad about it, but we were in a relationship and did have before. I broke up with him the following day, and apparently he cried about his broken heart to her. As Nico and Angie were close and hanging out together a lot, they started dating a few months afterwards and I had to see him every time when visiting her. I told her I'm not able to see him, but she didn't understand where I'm coming from. The contact stopped and we haven't texted or seen each other in years. I still followed her and her family and saw that her brother is expecting his first child. As I was extremely close with her family, I just commented on the Insta post expressing my gratitude when he reached out to me. I missed his wedding, but he wanted to ask if I would be interested in joining the baby shower, as it's been years and we've been extremely close before. He told me I was like a third little sister. I just asked if Nico will be attending as well, as Angie and him have been dating for 9 years now, and he said yes. I didn't elaborate much but just expressed that I'll send a small present if he can give me his current address but won't be attending. He kept on pestering me what exactly happened all those years ago and why I'm not in their lives anymore. Angie told her family I'm not able to see her with an ex of mine, but her brother thought there's more behind it. This is when I think I could be the asshole. I told him the truth about what happened back then. And while I didn't know it at 17, I know now that this was rape and I named it as such. I didn't receive any message back from him, but a few days later Angie reached out to me, furious. Nico had planned to propose during the baby shower, but Angie's brother is against it now, having learned why I stopped the contact. She loves Nico and will stay with him, but by doing so, her brother said she is no longer a part of his life, as he doesn't want his little baby girl in the same family as a rapist. Since then I've been getting messages from old high school acquaintances, telling me I should have ignored it, and not told anybody. Since I didn't speak up back then, I lost the right to do so now, and am a horrible person for ruining somebody's life over some stuff he did 10 years ago when he himself was a child as well. Reading all the messages defending my choices on speaking up made me realize how insecure I was on what I am allowed to do, and how much I was trying to make it right to other people besides myself. This especially included Nico and Angie. All of you are right, if Nico had changed he would have apologized, reached out, or tried to make amends in some way, either when word got to him from his brother-in-law, or at some earlier point in his life. My former best friend Angie should have been able to feel some sort of compassion if she had any respect for me as a human being or the time we spend together. Her reaction showed that I shouldn't hesitate on my actions. I went to therapy from 21 onwards and thought I moved on from the rape as best as I could, but I realized how ashamed I still am almost 10 years later about an incident that wasn't my fault at all. I was ashamed to speak up back then and afraid that people around me would look differently at me. And somehow I still felt bad about speaking up today, so I tried to own what happened to me now and not apologize for other people's behaviors, especially as they don't even show me respect. What happened since then? I archived every nasty message I got on WhatsApp so I wouldn't have to read them, but would have the proof if needed at a later point. Angie's mom called me the following day of the incident, crying. I shouldn't have answered the phone, but during the 10 years of friendship I saw her as an aunt, almost a second mom. She always joked that while her children would run around the house doing whatever, I would always take the time to drink a tea and talk with her, showing her more love and time than her actual children. While she said she's sorry for what has been and for what I went through as a child, she couldn't believe that I would ruin Angie's happiness over something like that. With Angie's brother refusing to have Nico as part of the family and Angie standing by Nico's side, it's divided their family and she is heartbroken. She has grown to love Nico like family as well and has known him for nothing more than a considerate young man who she knows will make her daughter happy. It wasn't nasty names or angry talk, just a heartbroken mother who faked to acknowledge my pain and saw the fault in me. Angie's mom tried to get me to apologize or to take it back, but I refused as I don't see the fault in me. With everything that has happened, I believe that Nico hasn't changed and is just hiding it better somehow. He can see how people are standing by him and supporting his behavior, so he won't have to change. And that is something I didn't want to indulge. Angie's mom not even one used the word rape, and I tried to correct her every time she talked about it, trying to name it for her to understand better, but she would just start sobbing more and it didn't make sense for us to continue to talk. Angie's mom used to be in contact with mine for some time, and she reached out to her after our talk. I was afraid that my mom would find out, since she's from a more conservative background. We had a long talk and I didn't get to see her, physically, yet, but she apologized for not being there for me or not making me feel like I can talk to her. I tried to calm her as best as I could, but when she asked me if my current partner knows I was used like that, I got angry. She was scared my partner would leave me if he found out, implying it was something that made me less precious or appealing. When she asked me to keep it a secret from our family abroad and in our country, I hung up. She was acting exactly the way I was afraid she would, as if it's something shameful. It was especially hard as I am trying my best to move away from the feeling of shame. She has since apologized, but it's clear that her view of me has changed. I don't yet know how to deal with it, but that's something to worry about in the next few weeks. As some of you suggested, I wrote Angie's brother, Sven, again and apologized for the mess, but I'm glad that it is out in the open and how proud I am that he's defending his family. I asked if his old email is still working, as I would just send a gift card. He didn't respond, but I got a message from his wife 2 days ago. She thanked me for speaking up and informing them about Nico. There were apparently had a few moments that made her uncomfortable, some jokes Nico made, and in retrospective she can see why. Sven apparently informed her the moment he got my initial text, and both of them have since seen Angie but not Nico. She refuses to be in the same room or house as him, and same goes to their unborn daughter. Sven and Angie's mom has been at their place multiple times to beg to forgive Nico, and Sven caved a little. Angie and Nico will get married. Sven will attend but his wife will not. He is allowed in the family but not in contact with either Sven's wife or daughter. Those restrictions are not for Angie. Sven was suffering trying to ease his mother's worries and is not able to take a stand and cut them out completely. This is a compromise they made without his wife's approval, and she told me she's trying her best to cut them out of their life indefinitely. She wanted to move back, closer to her family as well, and thinks this is a perfect opportunity but isn't sure if she can follow through. His wife told me she's terribly sorry for all the issues that came my way, and it has been a lot trying to handle the situation on their side. Sven knows it's not my fault, but he doesn't want contact. It's hard for him to talk or see my name because even though he knows I'm not the guilty party, in some way I was the bearer or bad news, and he sees me as the start of all this drama. She told me a few times that neither believe I'm the bad guy, they just are tired with everything and it's just been extremely hard on them. That's all that has happened so far. I am frustrated about how everything came to be. It feels like Nico will just continue with his life without having to be remorseful. I didn't want him to suffer, but I think some part of me wanted to at least receive some kind of apology for all the suffering I went through afterwards. I'm having to deal with my mother and her changed, shameful view on me, and even though I'm happy it's all out, it's extremely hard to stand by my choices. My partner and my best friends both have been my shoulder to cry on during this ordeal. Especially my best friend was enraged for me, and I am extremely grateful to have both by my side. Right now I'm just emotionally drained, but I'm sure it will be better once a few weeks passes. Fourth story. It was almost a fairy tale romance until it wasn't. At 24, I'd finally found someone I thought was worth spending my life with. We had met through mutual friends at work, and soon enough, we were inseparable. She was 23, and as things progressed, it became official on New Year's Eve 2 years ago. That night, amidst the fireworks and celebrations, we declared our relationship, sealing it with a promise of something that felt enduring and real. Early on, she told me about this guy, Marvin. He'd always had a crush on her, she said, and even tried to convince her to leave me in those early months, thinking he could win her over. We'd laugh about it together, her rolling her eyes at how pathetic Marvin seemed to her. She despised his persistence, or so I thought. Being honest, I couldn't quite see what made her choose me over him. I'm just a 5 feet 4 inches, nerdy Asian guy. Nothing that stands out in a crowd. But she always reassured me, and I believed her. 2 years of dating had gone by, and I decided it was time to take the next step. On New Year's Eve, with her family gathered, I got down on one knee and proposed. She said yes, and the moment felt perfect. I could already see a future together, and I had enough savings to plan a beautiful wedding without needing financial help from her family. But then came a twist I didn't expect. One day, while we were out running errands, she casually brought up the idea of a threesome. We were young, and she reasoned that this was a good time to explore different things together. After some back and forth, she suddenly suggested Marvin for it. Yes, Marvin. That guy who had always chased her, who she said she couldn't stand. I couldn't deny that this was an enormous red flag, but when I asked her why him, she claimed it was just a one-time thing. He was, apparently, someone she was sexually attracted to, and that was it. Trying to be open-minded, I said okay but insisted we set ground rules first. It wasn't something I wanted to rush into, and I wanted to make sure it wouldn't disrupt our relationship. She agreed, or so she said. But her excitement only grew. She began showing me hotels, making plans, eager to bring Marvin in as soon as possible. It got to the point where I had to tell her to calm down or the whole thing was off. She apologized, but something still felt wrong. Then, one afternoon, while she was napping beside me, a nagging feeling told me to check her phone. I hesitated but gave in, and that's when the truth hit me. She'd been seeing Marvin behind my back for months. They'd been meeting in secret, sharing their fantasies, even taking compatibility tests to see if their interests aligned. She wasn't interested in a one-time thing, this was a full-blown affair. Furious, I woke her up and confronted her. Tears streamed down her face as she tried to apologize, saying she didn't know what she was doing. I didn't stick around to hear more. I packed my things, left, and booked a hotel room to clear my mind. But the nightmare wasn't over. Later that night, her parents called me, saying I was blowing things out of proportion and being childish for ruining the engagement. They accused me of being the one at fault since I'd brought up the idea of a threesome in the first place. They said their daughter wasn't to blame and that I needed to man up. The calls and messages kept coming, from her family, all asking me to come back, to patch things up. But the trust was gone, shattered by her lies and betrayal. I spent the next few days canceling all the wedding arrangements, one by one, while the messages from her family continued, blaming me for everything. In the end, what I'd hoped would be my forever turned out to be just another lesson in trust and betrayal. The wedding plans were cancelled, but I walked away with a renewed understanding of what I deserved and what I didn't. After days of dealing with her family's blame and accusations, I finally reached out to my ex-fiancé's father, hoping we could have a reasonable conversation. We'd always gotten along well, bonding over similar interests, and I felt he was someone I could at least explain my side to. We met at a nearby mall. Though he looked angry, he agreed to listen. I came prepared, armed with screenshots of the conversations between my ex and Marvin. As he read through them, his expression shifted from disbelief to frustration. It turned out that my ex had spun an entirely different story to her parents, crying to them that I was breaking things off because she'd suggested Marvin for a threesome and I had overreacted. My ex hadn't told them about her affair, nor had she mentioned that Marvin had been going over to comfort her since we split. After he read everything, my former father-in-law was furious. He insisted on helping me remove all of her belongings from my apartment. So, we went back, packed up her things, and I took the engagement ring back as well. I had spent too much time and money on this relationship to let it all go that easily. The ride back to his house was tense, neither of us saying much. When we arrived, we walked inside to see her mom, my ex, and, of course, Marvin all sitting together in the living room. My ex looked like she'd been crying for hours. Marvin had his arm around her, and her mother sat nearby, holding a box of tissues. When her mom saw me, she asked my father-in-law, "What is he doing here?" He calmly replied, "We need to clear some things up, and he's here to clarify the truth." I sat down, and Marvin tried to get up to leave, but my ex's father told him to stay, saying, "You're a part of this too." Marvin's legs started shaking nervously, and he avoided looking at me or my ex. Then my former father-in-law surprised me by announcing that I'd agreed to go forward with the engagement, but on one condition: Marvin needed to show him his WhatsApp conversations with my ex. I almost protested. I hadn't agreed to anything of the sort, but then I realized what he was doing. My ex had likely deleted her messages with Marvin. But if Marvin hadn't, his conversations would confirm everything. Marvin started stammering and protesting, but my ex's father insisted, urging him to do it for her daughter. A heavy silence filled the room as Marvin and my ex exchanged a panicked glance. Finally, Marvin stood up and walked out without a word. The silence broke, and my ex started crying again. Her father cut her off, telling her to stop acting. He then turned to her mother and said, "I've already seen the screenshots myself. He's been lying and cheating for months." Her mom was in disbelief, so I showed her the screenshots too. Shocked and hurt, they both began berating my ex, asking how she could do this and then lie to her family. Her father walked out to unload her belongings from the car onto the driveway and then told her she wasn't welcome to stay there anymore. Before leaving, my ex's father came over to me and apologized. He said he felt betrayed too, that he'd always thought he raised someone more honorable than this. He even offered to keep in touch, saying he'd like to check in on me from time to time. When I got home, I felt emotionally drained. The rush of everything had finally worn off, leaving an ache I hadn't felt before. Later that night, my ex tried calling me, but I blocked her number. I spoke with the security team at my building, requesting that they refuse her entry if she ever showed up. Then, I decided to take control of the narrative and post it on Facebook and Instagram, sharing what had happened along with screenshots to ensure my friends and family understood the truth. As for the wedding expenses, I'll recover most of my money after canceling the venue, catering, and other bookings. I've also made an appointment to sell the engagement ring and put that money toward moving out of state. A fresh start somewhere far away from this mess. After getting an STD test just to be safe, I'm relieved that I'm in the clear health-wise. I'm closing this chapter, knowing I made the right choice. I may be scarred by this betrayal, but I'm walking away stronger, knowing I deserve better. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed today's story, make sure to give this video a thumbs up and consider subscribing to Red Relationships to never miss a future upload.